What's the first thing you realized after moving out of your parents' home? Story 1, that I finally had no one to explain myself to. I want to go out at 2 a.m., just walk out the door. I came home at 4 a.m., just walk in the door. I come home drunk with my own puke all over myself. Just go in the toilet and question my existence while I clean up. Story 2, how beautiful the double-edged sword of freedom is. You can do whatever you want, but you have no safety net. If you don't manage everything, your life will happily run itself off the rails in a ton of tiny, insidious ways. Story 3, chicken doesn't have to be dry. Spaghetti sauce doesn't have to come from a can. Love my folks, but they aren't chefs by any means. Edit, apparently my mom wasn't the only one to make leathery chicken. Story 4, people really scare me about bills. Oh, you're going to have to pay bills every month, and ITLL be the worst. Sure, it's not super nice having to take my money and give it to various people at regular intervals, but it's not stressful. Living with my parents was way more stressful than paying bills has ever been. Story 5, most of the habits you have are actually your parents' habits they passed on to you. I also noticed that not everyone who moves out of their parents' house realize this. Story 6, a small thing, but I have 2 younger brothers who are always quite greedy and selfish with food. My mom would buy a limited amount of snack food, and once it was gone until the next big food shop. My brothers would dive in like locusts and eat all of the crisps, chocolate, ice cream, or whatever, and leave nothing for me. It's been 10 years since I moved out, and I never stopped being happy that the chocolate I bought a week ago and am looking forward to after work is still there when I get home. It's nice having control over your own stuff. Story 7, that everything costs money. Rent costs money. Council tax costs money. Heat costs money. Water costs money. Electricity costs money. Groceries cost money. Petrol costs money. Maintenance costs money. TV license costs money. Just living costs money. I was in no way spoiled or sheltered when I was growing up, but even I shocked by the expense of everything. I dread to think how much my parents must have been spending every month just to keep a family of 5 alive. Makes me appreciate them even more, and I feel awful about when I used to moan about not having stuff when I was growing up. Story 8, that the real world is easy. I was 18 when I moved out. I had already been paying for my car and car insurance, health insurance, and taking care of myself, clothes, food, dog financially for years because my mom was incapable of taking care of herself hardly, let alone her daughter. I've always been the one to cook and clean and budget money and take care of myself and others. My family would ask how it is to not live with my mom and living on my own, asking if it was a huge shock or anything like that other than having less spending money. It was the exactly same as living with my alcoholic, hardly home mother. My childhood might have been, but I grew up fast and was able to migrate to living on my own and adulthood seamlessly. Story 9, how much they actually took care of. These own a house, cabin, a condo, and manage every single bill they have while working more than full-time jobs. The kicker, they still have free time like WTF parents. I can barely make breakfast and be out the door on time. Yet y'all just made a 5-course breakfast and have finished half your emails in the same time. It made me appreciate how efficient they were with their time. Story 10, that freedom from someone else dictating your life is absolutely worth all the other responsibilities that go with living on your own. It's not even close. Story 11, that I had made a huge mistake. However, I could sit as close to the TV as I wanted and stand there with the refrigerator door open and cool the whole neighborhood. Story 12, that cleaning isn't such a chore as parents make it out to be. I clean 1 day a week on a Saturday for about 3 hours, and that's it. Everything is done. I just make sure to clean up after myself as best I can. Sometimes I'll leave that thing out on my coffee table for a while, or leave dirty clothes near my laundry basket. But not quite get it in, but it's no biggie, small messes here and there. Still in the end, just a few hours on a Saturday to vacuum, Clorox, Windex, and Lysol everything, and it's clean for another week. I realized that most of the messes my parents would complain about were ones that they made themselves that got out of control, and then they would pin it on me to help clean it up. Now everything's clean. No one nags for it to be cleaner since it's already spotless, and it's wonderful. Story 13, the house needed a lot of day-to-day supplies, so the first few shopping trips were insanely expensive. Things like cooking oils, flour, sugar, saran wrap, tin foil, garbage bags, mops, brooms, plungers, flashlights, etc. You don't really realize how many things you need on hand when you already had them for years. Story 14, my parents were chain smokers. My whole life, I lived in a smoke-filled house. That first time I came back home from college, I was hit with a wave of stale cigarette smoke. I realized 2 things cigarette smoke smells like, and I figured out why I grew up with pretty nonstop allergies and asthma. Why anyone would willfully fill their house with that is beyond my understanding. Story 15, that being an adult is way less scary than it was made out to be. It isn't normal to spend a whole 12-hour day once a week going over finances. It isn't normal for it to take 2 months to resolve a phone call with a company. Cleaning the house shouldn't take a whole week. Driving isn't that bad. My mom made me terrified to be an adult, and now I'm handling just fine. I'm really pissed at how anxious she made me. Story 16, that I wasn't the messy one. When the person you're living with makes no effort to keep a place tidy, there's no incentive for you to you're either picking up two people's messes or picking up your own, but still feeling like it's always messy. So what's the point? After I moved out, my apartment never has clutter, never has dishes in the sink, gets vacuumed regularly, etc. My mom's house, on the other hand, is still a disaster. Story 17, the skyrocket of my self-esteem. There was no one there to call me fat or tell me my clothes and hair were ugly, stupid. The constant criticism and drunken abuse vanished. It was no longer my responsibility to get my loser brother doing things or meeting people he's 3 years older than me. I still see my mom and dad most weekends, but as soon as my mom starts drinking, I get a peace out and go home. Story 18, that I didn't have to worry about an abusive drunk waking me up after 2 a.m. to blame me for stuff that wasn't my fault, that in my migraines miraculously could improve without someone yelling at me. Story 19, you realize how precious your parents are. When I first went to college and had to run around a lot for vital documentation, or when I was exploring investment options, I realized how I had been taking my dad for granted. Like all parents, mine aren't perfect, and I have had my share of fights with them when I was a kid, the typical tantrums, etc. But when I moved out, a lot of small incidents or situations made me realize how my parents helped, supported, and loved me in ways no other person would. And I started focusing on this rather than their imperfections. I have been angry at my mom for many things, but every time I speak to her on the phone, I keep my anger aside. And I do call her up every day. We talk about many things. When you've only an hour or a half each day, on an average, to talk to your parents, you don't waste precious talk time on bitter complaining. You talk about positive things. Story 20, that not everything needs to be immediate. Growing up, if my parents told me to do something, they meant now. Dishes needed to be done now. Trash needs to be done now. Lawn needs to be mowed now. When I moved out, most adults in my life assumed it would go to because I seemed lazy, but really it just let me do what I needed to at my own pace instead. Dishes can sit a day or two. Trash can wait a bit. Not everything is an emergency. Story 21, when I lived at my mom's, I had to ask for permission to shower. When I moved out, I would ask my roommate if I could shower. It wasn't until a couple months of living together that she told me I didn't have to ask and I could just shower. I had no idea it was a weird thing to ask permission for, that and a lot of other things. Story 22, that I didn't have to account for all my comings and goings, report where I was and when I'd be back. And when I came home, I didn't have that pit in my stomach that I had at my parents' house, knowing I would no longer be interrogated and criticized for whatever I was doing. I knew my parents were controlling and abusive, but I didn't realize how bad it was until I left. Best decision ever. Story 23, how much I didn't miss it. My roommate was calling home constantly and terribly homesick, but I never felt that. I somehow have a closer relationship with my family after moving out than I did while I lived with them, and their house never fully felt like a home to me. The saying home is where the heart is true, even if you're not talking about being in love. I wasn't close with my family and didn't feel like that house was much of a home. I lived in an apartment with my best friend from 2012 to 2014, and I still miss it terribly at times. Story 24, it was weird and a bit existential. I moved out at 18. I am 59 now. I have supported myself since raised a family and own my own home. I remember the first night in bed, the light on, because I was reading and looking up into where the walls intersect with the ceiling, and thinking how little material truly separates me from the real and metaphorical realities and dangers of the world. How no matter where I was, it was all ephemeral and fleeting, and there were no guarantees. Story 25, peanut butter does not need to be kept in the fridge, and it's so much better that way. My parents are normal, intelligent people. I don't know why they do this. Story 26, not sure. It took a few weeks to set in that I'm not living in my parents' home. The one thing I remember is being hesitant to buy an iced coffee at the corner grocery, buying food that I need. For myself, I've never done this before. Story 27, every once in a while you realize that just because you can doesn't mean you should. One of my first memories of this is one day I'm sitting on the couch, fully naked, eating rainbow ice cream out of the bucket. Watching a movie, at first it was amazing. I can do whatever I want. No one will tell me to drop doing this. After a few minutes, though, I'm cold and sticky. This sucks. Why was this ever a good idea? There was nothing fun about this idea. I think there's ice cream on my new couch now. I hope that's chocolate ice cream. Story 28, I can finally bring friends and women over my house and not be embarrassed. I moved out 4 years after my father died and my mother married again and moved to a new place. It was I and my sister. She was into hardcore drugs, so I tried to get her help, and no matter what I or other family members did, she refused to admit she had a problem. Story 29, there are so many dozens of annoying little things that you need to buy if you want your residence to really feel like a home. Laundry basket, more than one pillowcase, more than one sheet, pins, envelopes, rubber bands, string, scissors, screwdrivers, a hammer, light bulbs, dish soap, a dish rack. Apartments don't just come with those things, of course. I knew apartments don't come with those things, but I didn't fully appreciate just how many of those little things there are. Story 30, I was just talking about this with a friend. I recently moved out and live on my own for a few weeks. The first thing that I realized was how much my mom has done for me. I suffer from depression and had periods where I would not get out of my room. My mom did everything for me, like cooking healthy meals or doing the laundry. I helped my mom with cooking and chores, but having depression was difficult to get out of my bed and have the motivation to do something. I'm just so grateful for what she did for me and how she could hold it for so long. Now I try to repay her for everything that she did to help me. Thank you, Mom. Story 31, the loveliness of quiet. No more mom screaming about something. No more little sister having a fit about something she did not get, then running away. Mom crying and literally wringing her hands for hours. No more older brother literally pushing me around. Of course, it took years to get over the jitters that Mom would be busting through the apartment door and screaming at me. But that went away with time. I could do whatever I wanted, and it was the best. No more Mom telling me what a loser I am, etc., etc. I worked and put myself through university, although with all that freedom, I had a hard time deciding what to study. So I studied everything. The silence was heavenly, and the beginning of my adult life was delightful. Story 32, how their constant fighting was bringing me down. It is scary how free I felt once I actually moved away. Then my parents had a divorce, and I was guilt-tripped into moving back to my hometown to help them out. I finally moved in with my boyfriend, and we've been together for 9 years with only one fight, verbal, never physical, and that was due to a PTSD issue, so it really wasn't anyone's fault. Story 33 is expensive. Moved out when I was 18 on not great pay. Was quite a shock to my system having to budget and not spend all of my money on shite. That living alone is really boring. I was prepared for the financial responsibility, knew how to take care of a home, etc. I wasn't quite prepared for the now, what after chores and cooking cleaning done. Ended up inviting folks over or going to visit others frequently. I stopped at my parents' house all the time as well. Also, the control of the air conditioner was finally mine. You wouldn't know, it was summer from the inside of my frigid house. Story 34, I guess I had a different experience than most. I found out my brother and I did all the housework, dishes, yard work, and took care of the animals. I had a ton more free time, still kept everything clean, but took me like a tenth of the time because it was just me. I was used to going to school, working, and taking care of everything around the house. The transition was actually really nice. Story 35, my parents just did so much. Not in a work hard to get out of adversity kind of way, though they did do that. Just chores, all of the chores. When I was a kid, I would go to school, do my laundry, take out the trash, do the dishes, and I thought I had a full plate. Now I have to work full-time, cook and do the laundry, take out the trash and clean my entire apartment, take my car in and do grocery shopping and balance my checkbook. There's just so many things, and I already did things in college. I had to do an adult thing every once in a while, but now I do responsible adult things all the time. It's the worst. And I have to do my own doctor's appointments. Ugh. Story 36. It makes me sad to see that the majority of these responses are so negative towards parents. For me, it was realizing I wasn't able to hang out with my mom, who is my best friend, every day, that I can't just run impromptu errands with my dad, that I miss sharing meals with them, and having two people who so sincerely care about everything going on in my life to talk to at any time. I had taken them for granted. Now that I'm thousands of miles away, it's even worse. Story 37, holy. I can close things normally. I can close the microwave and let it make noise. The fridge doors, I don't have to walk on eggshells. Unfortunately, 18 years of eggshell walking, I still move about as quiet as a ninja. Story 38, adulting is complicated. I moved out at 18 and live alone in a trailer in a student-only trailer park. I had to deal with managing a lawn, a house, bills, study, etc. I learned how AC units worked when mine quit, and I couldn't leave and my folks were a 4-hour drive away. I learned how to do pest control when the flying roaches were everywhere. When I had 2 ants in the window before finals and a few hundred when I got home, I had to figure that out. It's South Alabama, so yeah, I learned how to cook. I learned how to problem solve. Google wasn't a thing yet early aughts, so I learned and figured it out as I went. I can still remember staring at a chicken breast in the skillet and shrugging and throwing on all sorts of herbs. Why not? I learned how to invest in the stock market and manage money. Living on your own is both incredibly amazing but also difficult too. I had entire responsibility of that trailer, including all the maintenance and things that came with it. I had no one for 5 hours away from me. So you manage, made me appreciate my parents quite a bit. Mom and I had problems being under the same roof, but she was a great mentor over the phone. Story 39, although it's a good idea, having a budget is not an absolute necessity to living. When I first moved out, my mom freaked out on me and told me I wasn't ready and I was going to fail because I hadn't taken time to draw out a budget, been winging it for 5 years, and I've never overdrawn my account once. Story 40, that you should always have bread and milk in the house. When I moved out to study, I got lazy with the grocery shopping and found myself eating dry cornflakes and spoonfuls of honey to keep me going, and how often you have to clean the toilet. Story 41, moving from my mom's to my grandparents. Fuck, she still has all my clothes except the ones I wore last night. Moving out of my grandparents at college. They'll never have to hear mom's car pulling up and cringe ever again. Story 42, clothes need hangers. Turn up to uni with a ton of clothes and no hangers. Empty wardrobe and clothes on the floor for the next 3 years, but that probably would have happened if I had hangers anyway. Story 43, how little work is needed to get chores done. I come from a 6-person household. When I'm alone, I don't need a dishwasher. I mess up 1 plate and 3 pans tops for dinner. That's 5 minutes of cleaning dishes. With 6 people, it's a whole load on the dishwasher every day. Also, there aren't a bunch of small messes made by various people I have to clean. If I make a mess, 5 minutes to clean it up. That's it. No day of chores, just 10 to 15 minutes every day. Story 44, that the washing machine actually needs me to manipulate its dials to work and provide me with fresh and neatly folded clothing, apparently. And this is just what I figured out so far. So bear with me. I have to actually pay attention to its motion, and when it stops 1 hour later, I need to transfer my cloth from the washing machine to the dryer to dry. And then even an hour later, need to pull out my cloths and do something called fold them. I swear. These concepts so far are very intricate and eye-opening. I always just threw the stuff on the floor, and magically my wardrobe was restored, respawned. I don't know the proper terminology here. Still learning. Watching the machine work, studying its habits. Intriguing how it all works. Marvelous. Story 45, that my parents are old people now. My parents are older than average. I'm 25, my dad is 63. My mom is 59. I realize now my parents are a couple in their 60s, living alone with their kids moved out and close to retirement. Then I realize that my dad probably has 20 years left, and that 20 years isn't as long as it once seemed. But I was 24 when I moved out. I spent more than enough time living at home, but it was a bittersweet drive north. Story 46, how freaking smart those people were. Where months and years before that I was just positive they were dumb as rocks. Zero. I do recall calling my mother about a month or so after I left the nest and apologizing for every single horrible thing I had done. I'm now 48, and she still tells that story. Y'all have a great day. Story 47, how nice most human beings actually are, that they don't all about everyone else constantly and try to destroy other people's confidence. I grew up assuming that most people were like my mother because that's what she told me. If someone was nice to me, she'd say afterwards, you know what they really think about you, though? Everyone knows what you're really like. They're just too nice to say to your face. Not so. And I was very happy to discover this. Story 48, how little food I actually eat. I cooked roast and stews only for the leftovers to go bad because I don't eat it quickly enough. It's the same with veg, it goes bad before I can use most of it because I'm not cooking tons of it. Story 49, nothing really. My parents gave my siblings and I chores growing up, and my mom taught me how to cook bake, so it was pretty much just doing all that in a different place. I had a job before and was buying my own food, paying some of my own bills while living with them, so it was nothing really new per se. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so my mom also didn't exactly like the thought of me living by myself. She's overprotective with bad lows, and all, if no one is there, good chance I can't get help, and he'll die. She seemed pretty ecstatic when my husband and I moved in together. I was 19. Dealing with my diabetes without her took some work. I never realized how much she did the micromanaging for me until I moved out. Sad to say, I went through a period of that not caring. 9 years later, I'm happy to say I have no complications. The biggest thing for me was realizing how much my mom was right about most things too, how human my parents became. I also miss her company. I was really close with her and still talk to her nearly every day. My younger brother, 17, just moved out to go to college, and my dad has gone a lot. She's been really lonely. We live 2K miles away, so all I could do for her is call text. Story 50, that every time I go back home, everything feels smaller. Like, I feel like I physically grew once I moved out, but I didn't. Everything somehow feels shorter. This same feeling has persisted with house hunting, though not all the time. Also, I'm shorter than 55, so this feeling is really weird. Story 51, that I'm allergic to cats. I spent 18 years with constant allergies that were attributed by the family doctor to living in the Northwest. In the summer, it was pollen. In the winter, it was mold. No, it was two family cats, lol. Story 52, how great of parents they were to budget a vacation, or two a year, to Disneyland and across the country. I still ask them how they did it every year with what they made a year. Story 53, that I don't have to keep clothes on, but I also soon realized that when someone knocks at the door, you have to answer it. So maybe always being naked isn't the best of ideas. Story 54, getting to choose who I let in my home. Being able to eat what I want, when I want, not having to walk around on eggshells, not having to shut down the noise at exactly 8 p.m., being able to come home and leave at whatever time I choose, being able to see my friends as often as I want. It's funny, for years and years I've always believed that I was the most careless person, losing everything I owned of any value. Makeup, money, electronics, clothes, jewelry, I would lose it all. So I thought, upon moving out in the first 2 years, I noticed that I'm a very careful individual. I have certain places for everything, and I am quite obsessive about it. I've come to the realization that it was never me. My siblings stole my things. This suspicion was confirmed the first and only time I had my sister for an overnight stay. Suddenly all my valuables were missing again. Suffice to say, she is not allowed back in my home for any reason. She's made enough money off of me, and I don't want to give her the chance to steal more. Story 55, my mental health was so much better. Coming home every day and having your mom and sister constantly nagging at each other takes a toll on you after a while. Story 56, I remember the first time my dad came to visit my first place that he helped me get. I had everything perfect to be a host. So my dad walks in and I tell him where he can put his wet, snowy, muddy boots. He looked at me and said, "No, I want to keep my boots on." I was confused since we were never allowed shoes in the house. I told him that if he walked around in wet boots, it could ruin the floor. So he said, "Okay, he'll sit on the couch and not walk around too much." I responded with, "Yeah, but Dad, if you sit there, you get your boots on my new rug." He liked my rug, so he shifted his feet, so it was back on the floor. At this point, I just kind of gave up, figuring he was just being stewborn for some reason. So I offered my dad a drink. He wanted a club soda. Instead of handing him a can, I poured in a nice glass I just bought. He took a sip and put it down on the table. I quickly picked it up and put a coaster under it. He looked at me funny, and I said, "Dad, I'm trying to keep this place clean. Please use a coaster." And he snaped. His response was, you walked to my house with your shoes, made holes in my wall, split bleach on my carpet, had parties in my house while I was away, and you want me to use a coaster?" I laughed, and in an instant realized all the things I did and everything he did to fix it. I put my head down, still laughing, and said, "Put your boots on the rug so he could sit comfortably." Till this day, my dad is the only one allowed to walk in my house with his shoes on. Story 57, realized that I was right to think they were weird and uptight. Also, they were very melodramatic about how much I D up. I have a little bit, but overall, my quality of life is a lot higher than it was. Once I'm not a student, though, maybe they'll be right. Story 58, when I lived with my parents. Every time I left some mess in my room, my mother would say, "When you have your own house, you will see how it is like to be Hones. It doesn't bother that much as long as it's clean. I cannot freak out for a mess during the week. It'll clean when there's time." Story 59, just how controlling my parents are. Every time I leave the house, I have to tell them what I'm doing and where I'm going. Going on dates or out of town is nearly impossible because they'd be suspicious of me going out for extended periods of time. Every time I did, I'd always be questioned afterwards. I can't wait to have my own place again. Story 60, finding things exactly where I left them in the morning made me feel lonely and sad. Eating by myself was not fun, too much silence. Good thing I soon met and married a wonderful man, and now we have a home full of talk and laughter. Story 61, having had pets my whole life, I never realized how lonely it would be without them. Having something there to welcome you home really makes a difference. Story 62, food doesn't just appear in the fridge. Somebody puts it there. That person needs money. No food appears in the fridge if that person has no money. College is hard. Story 63, am apparently kind of a clean, tidy person. My mom always made it out like I was some hoarder slob, but I have one of the cleanest dorms on our floor and am constantly the one picking up after people. Take that, Mom. Story 64, that being constantly stressed and high-strung and fearful about the presence of another person who lives with you isn't normal. Living with my mother was tantamount to living with a ticking time bomb. I never knew what would set her off, and never really realized what being relaxed in my own space was. To this day, and I haven't lived with my mother in 6 years aside from a brief 3 to 4 month stint, I still wake up sometimes, heart pounding, thinking I heard her screaming my name. Yet the first few years of bills and roommates and money issues sucked, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. Story 65, that I am finally free leaving was the best thing I ever did. I've had a job since I was 12, paid for my own clothes and supplies since I was 13, and was on my own at 17, my mother was convinced I would fail miserably and come back with my tail between my legs, despite it being at her insistence I leave. My first night alone, I panicked at 10 p.m. and quickly put myself to bed, worried I would be yelled at for staying up too late. It took a full half hour to figure out how silly that was, and that I could watch TV if I well wanted to. Not living with a violent, controlling, manipulative, malignant narcissist has been worth any hardship I've faced on my own. Yes, there are tough times when you are on your own, but they build character, keep you grounded, and you can deal with them any way you see fit in your own style. My mother may have paid most of the bills when I lived in that house, but it was pure enclosed in four walls and a roof. I've been nearly homeless a few times with not a penny to my name and no idea what to do about it. But not even that would make me go back. Story 66 started at 15. I had no basic home survival skills whatsoever. Learned to cook to survive and save. I also learned the value of money. The things I learned and value the most are: 1. Bleach is your friend, especially when you have roommates. You need to disinfect, sometimes a lot of. 2. Learn to hand wash clothes and the importance of sorting colors, because you want a failed tie-dye lab coat for Bio 101.3. You find out many ways to cook Spam, cup noodles, and corned beef just to make it tasty. 4. Microwave is a great tool for emergency meal prep. 5. If you're smart enough, you can live under 40 in a week for food and some bus fare. 6. As much as you think why, I can stay up whenever I want and watch Adult Swim cartoons all night. After a while, you get tired and kind of grow out of it. In fact, you will value sleep more. 7. Dirty dishes and sink creepy crawlies and heat-seeking cockroaches. Story 67, how tiring and time-consuming cooking a homemade meal every night was. I have mad respect for my mother. She would come home from working a full-time job and cook a full, homemade meal every night. Sure, we would have leftovers, but that was for lunch the next day. She made homemade enchiladas a couple times a month and made her own tortillas. I made that the first real dinner I had in my apartment, like an adult, and it was horrible. I underestimated the time it would take and the effort it took. I haven't made it since. Story 68, how much more peaceful my life was without the constant arguing and tiptoeing around them. They didn't get along, and Mom didn't get along with me either. Relationships between them and I have improved after I left. Story 69, that I'm a completely functional and happy person on my own. I assumed I would be lonely, the apartment would be too quiet, etc. Nope, I would still visit a couple times a month and call a time or two a week because I love my family, but I was just fine on my own from pretty much the get-go. Then my wife had to come along and ruin it. I really can't imagine going back to living alone now, even though I happily did it for many years. Story 70, holy 11 and on the street. That putting dinner on table every night and having clean clothes and bed sheets washed is a near impossible chore, and this doesn't factor in that they had to do this while helping you with homework, go to work, managing bills, vacations, trying to keep the house clean, your activities that they paid for and drove you to, all while trying to keep a clean house. Let's not even venture into how much you disappointed them despite all that, or how many times you prevented them from having, to the point that your father had to seek the services of a prostitute, contracted an STD, which he passed on to your mom. You basically ruined their lives. You should call your parents right this second and acknowledge what they did for you. Story 71, that I had to buy my own condiments. First time cooking in my new apartment, I proudly bought groceries, and it wasn't until I cooked my steak and reached up into the cupboard for salt and pepper that was always there at Mom's house that I realized that I had to put it there myself. Story 72, I realized how spoiled I'd really been. My chores around the house consisted of occasionally, maybe once a month, being told to clean, not the whole house, but some small portion of it. These are things I should have been made to clean every day, week, but for one reason or another, I just wasn't made to do them. Once I moved out, I suddenly had to wash dishes every day, do my own laundry. Yes, I didn't even do my own laundry, etc. I basically had to learn how to take care of myself from scratch at the age of 19. Parents, as much as you may want your child to always be in a good mood and never overburdened, give them responsibilities when they get a job. Make them pay a portion, even if just 25 toward their direct bills like car payments, insurance, etc. Make them do chores, organize, save their money, and more. These are skills they'll inevitably need to learn. And it's hard to break bad habits as an adult, at the age of 24, not a married mother, and doing pretty well as a housewife and copywriter. But many of my college roommates probably hated my guts for years while I figured out how to adult. TLDR, I didn't have responsibilities and got hit by life hard after moving out.